Good morning everyone. Welcome to another session of cost accounting. In the last session we have discussed example related with the flux method, right? From today we are going to discuss one new method, that is net wages payable and total wages payable. In the last session we have discussed this example. You must be remembering this, right? Number of workers dismissed we need to find out, and that we have found out. Example number 21. Today we are going to start with example number 22. From the following information, find out the amount of net wages payable in cash for the month of March. I am adding on one more thing here, and total wage cost. Two things we need to calculate, right? Net wages payable in cash and total wage cost. First information, salary per month 60,000, dearness allowance 125% of salary, total amount deposited to PF 12,000, total amount deposited to ESI 4,500, expenses to the amenities to the employees 4,000, which is not payable in cash, house rent received from 25 employees at the rate of rupees 200 per month. Employer's contribution in PF is at the equal rate with employees, while the ratio of employers and employees share into the contribution of ESI is 2:1. Two things we need to calculate: net wages payable in cash and total wage cost. See, these things are the perks and allowances and all which is provided to the workers. Salary આપવામાં આવે છે, dearness allowance આપો છો. Now PF and ESI. PF એટલે કે પ્રોવિડન્ટ ફંડ and ESI એટલે કે એમ્પ્લોઈઝ સ્ટેટ ઇન્સ્યોરન્સ. હવે તમને ખબર હોય છે કે વર્કર્સને જે સેલરી મળે છે એ પૂરેપૂરી હાથમાં નથી આવતી કેશ. ફોર એક્ઝામ્પલ, એક વર્કરની સેલરી છે 10,000, રાઈટ? પછી એમાં PFનો એને બેનિફિટ મળે છે, તો એવરી મંથ માનો કે 12% એમાંથી PF કટ થાય છે. સો 10,000 માંથી 12% એટલે કે 1,200 ડિડક્ટ થઈ અને એને સેલરી મળે છે, દેટ ઇઝ 8,800, રાઈટ? સો નેટ વેજીસ પેએબલ ઇન કેશ ફોર દેટ પર્સન ઇઝ 8,800. પણ એમ્પ્લોયરે તો એને કેટલું પે કરવું પડ્યું? 10,000. એમ્પ્લોયર એને કેશમાં એમ્પ્લોયરનો એક્સપેન્સ થયો 10,000, એમાંથી 1,200 છે PF અકાઉન્ટમાં જશે અને 8,800 છે એમ્પ્લોયીને અત્યારે કેશમાં મળશે. સો આઈ કેન સે from the viewpoint of employer, the expense of salary will be 10,000, but payable in cash is only 8,800. The remaining 1,200 will be paid to that worker whenever that person gets retired, right? તો અહીંયા આવું હોઈ શકે છે. ટોટલ વેજ કોસ્ટ અને પેએબલ ઇન કેશ બંનેમાં ડિફરન્સ હોઈ શકે છે. તો આપણે એ જ અત્યારે કેલ્ક્યુલેટ કરવાનું છે કે કેશમાં તમારે ઓવરઓલ કેટલા વેજીસ પે કરવાના અને વર્કર્સ રિલેટેડ તમને કોસ્ટ કેટલી લાગે છે, વર્કર્સ ઉપર તમને કોસ્ટિંગ કેટલું લાગે છે, એટલે કે વેજ કોસ્ટ કેટલી લાગે છે ઓર લેબર કોસ્ટ કેટલી લાગે છે, એ આપણે અહીંયા જોવાનું છે, રાઈટ? સો ધીસ ઇઝ ધ એક્ઝામ્પલ. હવે અહીંયા જોઈએ કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશનવાળું જોઈએ કે PFમાં બંનેનું ઇક્વલ કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન છે. એટલે કે મેં હમણાં જે 1,200 રૂપીઝની વાત કરી તો એ એમ્પ્લોયીનું કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન કહેવાય. એમ્પ્લોયર એટલે કે બિઝનેસના ઓનર, એનું બી ઇક્વલ કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન છે. એટલે ઓનર બી કેટલું કન્ટ્રીબ્યુટ કરશે? 1,200 ફ્રોમ હિઝ સાઇડ. અને ESIમાં કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન શું છે? 2:1, રાઈટ? સો હિયર વી હેવ ગિવન ટુ ઇન્ફોર્મેશન: total amount deposited to PF and total amount deposited to ESI. This total amount represents the amount or contribution of both the parties, employer as well as employee, right? So firstly we need to segregate these two amounts. So starting with the working note first. Right? The first working note, employers and employees contribution to PF, right? Equal contribution છે એવું કહે છે. તો એમ્પ્લોયર હવે ટોટલ કેટલું છે કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન PF નું 12,000. So total 12,000 into both are having equal contribution, so 1/2. So 6,000 rupees employer will contribute, and same way employee will contribute total 12,000 into again 1/2, because both of them are having equal contributions. So this is our first working note, contribution to PF. Employer's contribution will be 6,000 and employee's contribution will be 6,000. Next, second, employer and employees contribution to ESI, right? So total contribution of ESI was 4,500. So for employer 4,500, 2/3, 2:1. Employer and employee 2:1. So 2 part will be of employer and 1 part will be of employee. So this is 3,000 rupees, and employee 4,500 into 1/3, so that will be 1,500 rupees, right? So these are the contribution to ESI. Done. Third working note, house rent recovered from employees, right? So there are 200 employees, 200 rupees and 25 employees. So the amount is 5,000 rupees, right? These all represents the part of working note. Now we need to calculate two things, net wages payable and total wages, right? So firstly, let us calculate first net wages payable in cash. એટલે કે તમારે એમ્પ્લોયરના વ્યૂ પોઈન્ટથી વિચારવાનું છે, એમ્પ્લોયરે કેશમાં કેટલું પેમેન્ટ કરવું પડશે વર્કર્સને, રાઈટ? સો ફોર ધેટ પર્પસ, ઓર કેટલું કેશ કન્ટ્રીબ્યુટ કરવું પડશે વર્કર્સને. સો સ્ટાર્ટિંગ વિથ સેલેરી rupees 60,000 plus dearness allowance, it is given 125% of salary, that is 60,000. So 125% of this 60,000 will be 75,000, right? So this much amount represents the wages, the cash wages or total wages, we can say 135. Now certain deductions are there. From this amount, the employee's contribution to PF will be deducted. હમણાં જે મેં તમને 10,000 અને 1,200 વાળું એક્ઝામ્પલ આપ્યું હતું ને, સેમ એક્ઝામ્પલ ઇઝ અટેચ્ડ હિયર, સેમ એક્ઝામ્પલ ઇઝ એપ્લિકેબલ હિયર. માનો કે આ 10,000 છે, તો PF ડિડક્ટ થઈને પછી મારે અમાઉન્ટ પે કરવાના. સો અમાઉન્ટ પેએબલ ઇન કેશ કેટલા થશે? સેલરી માઇનસ PF, રાઈટ? એવી રીતે. તો અહીંયા PFની સાથે સાથે ESI કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન પણ છે, રાઈટ? સો એમ્પ્લોયીનું કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન અહીંયા લેવાનું છે. સો એમ્પ્લોઈઝ કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન ટુ PF ઇઝ 6,000. Likewise, employee is also contributing to the ESI scheme, employees state insurance scheme. So that is 1,500, right? It is employees, so it is about all the employees. So apostrophe S can be like this, 1,500, right? Then હાઉસ રેન્ટ રિકવર્ડ, હાઉસ રેન્ટ રિકવર કરો છો તો એ બી તમારી સેલરીમાંથી જ કટ થશે, રાઈટ. સો હાઉસ રેન્ટ રિકવર્ડ, જેની વર્કિંગ નોટ આપણે હમણાં અહીંયા જ કરી, ₹5,000. So that amount is also going to be recovered from the amount payable to the workers, right? So finally 1,35,000 minus 6,000 minus 1,500 minus 5,000. So that will be 1,22,500. This is called net wages payable in cash. મારે કેશમાં કેટલું પે કરવાનું થશે? 1,22,500. ભલે ટોટલ સેલરી 135 પે કરવાની છે, પણ આટલા ડિડક્શન્સ છે એટલે આટલી અમાઉન્ટ વર્કર્સને ઓછી મળશે કેશમાં. તો કેટલી મળશે કેશમાં? 1,22,500, રાઈટ. તો અહીંયા બધું આપણે લીધું એમ્પ્લોઈઝના વ્યૂ પોઈન્ટથી, એમ્પ્લોઈઝનું કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન. નાવ સેકન્ડ પોઈન્ટ, ટોટલ વેજ કોસ્ટ. ટોટલ વેજ કોસ્ટ ફાઇન્ડ કરવાની છે ઓર લેબર કોસ્ટ. હવે એમ્પ્લોયરના વ્યૂ પોઈન્ટથી જ વિચારવાનું છે બંને વસ્તુ. એમ્પ્લોયરને કેશમાં કેટલા પે કરવાના અને એમ્પ્લોયરને કોસ્ટ કેટલી થાય, રાઈટ. તો કેશમાં કેટલા પે કરવાને જોઈ લીધું, હવે લેબર કોસ્ટ જોઈએ. સો ધીસ ઇન્ક્લુડ્સ each and every items or each and every expenses which are incurred on the laborers, right. એની એમિનિટીઝ માટે યુઝ કરો છો, એને પે કરો છો. એમ્પ્લોયર જે પીએફ માટે કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન કરે છે એ બી આવી જશે, એમ્પ્લોયરનું ESI કન્ટ્રીબ્યુશન છે એ બી આવી જશે. સો ઇટ ઇન્ક્લુડ્સ ઓલ ધી એક્સપેન્સીસ વિચ આર રિલેટેડ વિથ ધ એમ્પ્લોઈઝ, રાઈટ, બાય ધ એમ્પ્લોયર. સો સ્ટાર્ટિંગ વિથ સેલરી, વન્સ અગેન સેલરી પે થાય છે વર્કર્સને. સો 60,000. dearness allowance is also paid, ₹75,000, right. Then the employer is contributing his share of PF. So employer's contribution to PF, જેની વર્કિંગ નોટ આપણે આગળ કરી લીધેલી છે, right. So employer's contribution to PF is 6,000. Then employer will again contribute for ESI. So employer's contribution to ESI, that is 3,000. That is also there in the working note. Then in the example it is given amenities to employees, expenses on amenities of employees which are 4,000. Let me show you that. Expenses to amenities to employees, expenses of or expenses on amenities, right. Amenities to employees 4,000, right. So that is also to be written here 4,000, okay. So this much amount that the employer has to bear from the part of employees. ઓનરે આટલી કોસ્ટ ઇન્કર કરવી પડશે વર્કર્સ પાછળ, રાઈટ. સો 60,000 plus 75,000 plus 6,000 plus 3,000 plus 4,000. So that is 1,48,000. So labor cost, ટોટલ વેજ કોસ્ટ કેટલી થશે? 1,48,000. પણ પેમેન્ટ ખાલી કેટલું કરશે કેશમાં? 1,22,500, because there are certain deductions which has to be borne by the employees, right. So employeesની સેલરીમાંથી એટલી અમાઉન્ટ કટ થાય છે, તો કેશમાં કેટલા પે કરવાના? 122,500. So this is useful for the part of your working capital requirement, and this is important from the viewpoint of your costing or wage cost, right. I'll change the focus further and I'll show you the same, the whole example once again afterwards, right. So this was the example in which we have discussed net wages payable and total wage cost. I have got one more example exactly like this. So let us have a look at that as well. Example number 23. This will be the last example of our this chapter, right? So pay attention properly. The following particulars are available from the records of ABC Limited. Basic wages 34,000, that is the salary or wages. Dearness allowance 24,000, night shift allowance 6,000, overtime allowance 10,000, total amount deposited to PF 8,000, total amount deposited to ESI 5,000, recovery of staff quarters rent 11,000, expenses on amenities to employees 3,000, contribution of employer and employees towards PF is 1:1 and for ESI it is 3:2. 1:1 and 3:2. Calculate net wages payable in cash and total wage cost. Right? So likewise, starting with the same working note here. First, contribution to PF. Employers and employees, both contribution. So if I am talking about employer, the total amount deposited to PF is 8,000, right? So employer will be 8,000 into 1/2, so 4,000. Employees contribution will be again 8,000 into 1/2, so 4,000. Okay. Next, contribution to ESI for both. So employee for the employer, sorry, the total amount is 5,000 and the ratio is 3:2. So 3 will be of employer and 2 will be of employee. So here this will be 3,000 and here it will be 2,000. Okay. Moving further with the same. Now the staff quarter rates or expenses of staff quarter rent is already given 11,000 directly, right? So we don't have to calculate the same like we did in the last example. So directly we can place that. Now going for the calculation. First calculation, net wages payable. So in cash, salary or wages paid 34,000, which is given in the example, plus dearness allowance 24,000. Then here two new things, night shift allowance and overtime allowance. Both of them are to be paid to the workers. So plus night shift allowance 6,000. Then overtime allowance rupees 10,000. So this can be considered as a part of your wages. So 34,000 plus 24,000 plus 6,000 plus 10,000. So that will be 74,000, right? So this can be called total wages, right? After this, we need to deduct certain things. So here, employees' contribution to PF, which was 4,000. Then employees' contribution to ESI, 2,000, right? Then recovery of staff quarters rent. It was 11,000, right? So all these things would be deducted from the same. So 74,000 minus 4,000, 74,000 minus 4,000 minus 2,000 minus 11,000. So the net wages payable in cash is 57,000. Right? This is the answer of net wages payable. Now moving towards total wage cost. So the second point that we need to find out, total wage cost. Right? So wages, basic wages or salaries which are given 34,000 plus dearness allowance 24,000, right? Then night shift and overtime allowance so night shift allowance is 6,000, overtime allowance 10,000, then employer's contribution to PF, it is 4,000, that we did in working note. Employees contribution to ESI, Employees State Insurance Scheme 3,000. Okay, અને હજી employer expense કરે છે expenses on amenities to employees, right? So that is 3,000. So finally my wage cost will be 34,000 plus 24,000 plus 10,000 plus 6,000 plus 4,000 plus 3,000 and plus 3,000. So my net wages payable in, my total wage cost is 84,000. So wages na costing થશે 84,000, પણ કેશનું પેમેન્ટ છે એ ઓછું થશે બીકોઝ ઘણા બધા ડિડક્શન્સ છે પીએફના, ઈએસઆઈના અને હાઉસ રેન્ટ રિકવર્ડના, રાઈટ? So this is all about our today's examples. Before changing the focus, let us revise what we did in this chapter, right? So if I am writing this down over here, so we have started with introduction to labor cost, right? Then we have started with different wage systems. Wage system નું પણ આપણે theory લઈ લીધી છે, right? Essentials of good wage system and all. Then we have done with time wage system. Second system હતી piece wage system. પછી incentive plans માં હતું healthy plan અને Rowan plan, right? આના બધાના આપણે examples પણ કર્યા along with the formula, right? After this, wages as per Rowan was given and wages as per healthy plan should be found out. That we did. Alright. After that, we have calculated labor turnover ratio, right? In that, separation method replacement method, flux method. Along with this, we also have taken, or we also have found out the examples of factory cost. So here labor turnover, separation, replacement, flux, and also EAR, equivalent annual rate of labor turnover, right? So separation, replacement, flux, EAR. Then we, under that also we have calculated number of workers dismissed. We calculated that, we need to find out number of workers at the end also were missing. So that type of example we also did, in which the answer of flux method is given, and on the basis of the same we have calculated the missing items, right? So altogether these many types of examples we did in this chapter, and today that we have calculated, that is net wages payable in cash and total wages cost. Any of these two examples, any of these two methods examples will be there in your exams, right? So this is the nutshell of this chapter. From the next lecture onwards, we are going to start with our next unit, that is overheads, right? So before signing off, I just want you to go through with the example. So I am just changing the focus so that you can have a look at it. See, this is the first example that we have started from today, right? Salary, dearness allowance, total amount deposited to PF, total amount deposited to ESI and all. Then working note, employers and employees contribution to PF. Then second working note about employers and employees contribution to ESI. Then house rent recovered and net wages payable, which are 1,22,500. Then total wage cost, that is 1,48,000, right? So wage cost is 148 and payable in cash 122,500. Next example, this example number 23. Working note same, contribution to PF 4,000 each, contribution to ESI 3,000 and 2,000, net wages payable 57,000, and net total wage cost is 84,000, and the nutshell of the same chapter, right? So this is it for today's lecture. From the next session we are going to start with new unit. All right, thank you all.